Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa-salatu wa-salamu ala rasulil kareem, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our next lesson in the beginner level of Tajweed, where we're preparing to learn the basics in order to read the Quran with confidence. So far we've wrapped up our arc on the single letter, going over subjects like makharij and touching subjects like sifat and characteristics of letters. Next we're going to look at how we join letters. So in order to join a letter, you need the sukoon. So just to review some terms, harakat are these demarcations that we put on top of letters so we know what vowel to apply to it. Almost every letter starts off as a consonant and then we apply a vowel on it. So fatha applies the a sound, kasra applies the e sound, and dhamma applies the u sound, and fatha and dhamma go above the letter and kasra goes below. Now if a letter doesn't have a vowel on it, then we would just use the consonant sound. And the way we denote that on a letter is by either leaving completely blank or by placing this mark called a sukoon on it. And sukoon means rest. So you rest on this letter. There's no action taking place. There's no haraka. Haraka means movement on this letter. You're resting on it. So you just say the consonant sound. That's what sukoon is. That's how you join two letters. So to practice applying the sukoon, let's just take the example of hamza, fatha, a. Then we'll place the letter that we want to stop on next to it, let's say sheen, and place a sukoon on that letter. So we take the a sound of the hamza, we're reading right to left, and then we just take the consonant sound of sheen, which is sh, and we get a, sh. If you take away that pause, we put it together, ash, ash. If we have a heavy letter like kha, you would still keep the lightness of the hamza and the heaviness of the kha. And when you stop on it, we start with a, then we say the consonant sound of the kha. A, just a sound. A, and we said kha is soft, so that sound would drag a little bit. A. So, for example, if we look here, and I'm taking the example of hamza here in this word, because hamza is kind of the exception. So we start with the letter ya. Ya has a fatha, ya fatha, ya. And then hamza has a sukoon. And we said hamza usually takes the sound of the vowel that's on it. Now what if it doesn't have a vowel? Then what? Well, hamza kind of becomes incomplete. Hamza becomes like somebody cut off what you're about to say. So for example, say you're telling a story and somebody cuts you off and you're about to say the word yesterday, but instead of yesterday you say yet, yet. That's kind of how it sounds to stop on hamza. It's like the uh-oh in English. Uh-oh, silly example, but it'll help it stick. So this word is not yatiyahum, where we kind of ignore the hamza, or we make the fatha longer, which we'll go into later. But it's yatiyahum, yatiyahum. Same thing with this word below here. It's not yuminuna, where hamza is not pronounced. It's yuminuna. Yu'minuna. Almost like you're coming to an abrupt stop. Yu'minuna. That's how you stop on hamza. A very important concept when it comes to sukoon is the concept of Qalqalah. So Qalqalah is a Tajweed rule wherein if one of these 5 letters has a sukoon on it, and it could be a temporary sukoon placed by a stop, then you would bounce on that letter. Meaning if you imagined a ball, if the ball is bouncy and it lands on the ground, it'll kind of shoot back up. But if the ball wasn't bouncy, say it was a fruit, for example, that fell, it doesn't bounce up the way a rubber ball would. So similarly, like I said before, all letters have specific characteristics. And these 5 letters in particular have the characteristic of Qalqalah, meaning that when they're stopped on, you bounce on them in order to properly portray the depth of the letter. So how do we bounce on a letter? So the bouncing part sounds like you're almost saying a fatha or an a sound on the letter. Or for the heavy letters, qaf and ta, it sounds like you're almost saying an a sound after you stop on the letter. So let's take ba here for example. We won't say ab, that's taking away the entire sound afterwards. You would say ab, ab. That's how you bounce on a letter. It's not a full fatha, it's not aba, but it's ab, ab. You can imagine if you write it the way we've been writing it, instead of A, B, it would be A, B, tiny A in the corner. Abba, abba. That's why some people call it an echo. It's like, echo, echo, echo. It's kind of like a faint hint of a fatha. left over. So the way to remember these 5 letters, qaf, ta, ba, jim, and dal, is this mnemonic, qutubu jaddin, qutubu jaddin. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, just a way to remember it. Qutubu jaddin, or I just call them qutubu jadd. Qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal. Again, write them down, repeat them, qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal. That's how you're going to stick it to your memory. So let's take a look at one example for each of these letters. The first word, we have hamza fatha, qaf sukoon. It's going to be aqo, 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 aqo. It's not aq, but aqo, aqo. And don't go the opposite way, saying aqa. That would be with fatha. Aqobil is this word. The example for ta starts with sheen, fatha, sha, ta, sukoon, sha, to. Sheen is light, ta is heavy, sha, to, sha, to, ra. The example for ba, seen, fatha, sa, ba, sukoon, sabi, sabi. In this one, both are light. So even when you're bouncing, you would smile if it's light. Sabi, and frown if it's heavy. The example for jim starts with waw, fatha, wa, jim, sukoon, wajh, wajh, and the word would be wajhika. And then the example for dal starts with waw, fatha, wa, sheen, fatha, sha, wa, sha. Then we have dal, fatha, wa, shada. And then the second dal has sukoon, so we'll only say the d sound, but bounce on it. Wa, shadad, wa, shadad, smiling. And the entire word would be washadadna. I want to take a moment to quickly go through the rest of the alphabet to give you an idea of how the rest of the alphabet would sound. All the rest of the letters are not bouncy, and I'll point out the ones that people normally mistake to be bouncy and add a bounce. So starting from the bottom of the throat, we talked about hamza, and then if ha had a sukoon, just like an H. Moving to the middle of the throat, if ayn had a sukoon, This is a tricky combination because hamza and ayn sometimes can sound similar. But let's take the word from Surah Fatiha, na, noon fatha, ayn sukoon, na. People typically make this very soft, like na, or too hard, na, adding too much strain. But it's na in the middle, na, budu. Ha, same thing, constricting, starting with hamza fatha, ha sukoon, For kha, like we just said, and ghain, similar, Qaf is bouncy, we just did that, aql. Then kaf is not like kha or qaf, it has air, ak. Jim is bouncy, aj. Sheen, straightforward, like a sh sound, ash. Ya, when ya has a fatha before it, and you stop on the ya, this is a separate rule called madleen, but we'll look at that later. Essentially making ya soft. A. Dad is one of those letters that people, when they stop on it, usually make it bouncy. Like saying al-da'a. Dad, you do not bounce. So how do you stop on it? Not al, but al. The entire sound of dad is pronounced inside of the mouth. Al. And you might hear a little bit of noise that's just the teeth releasing from the molars. Al, but it's not anywhere near the half fatha sound, the sound, and it's nowhere near a full fatha sound. So it's technically not ghunna. Al, afanadribu. For lam, it's not alham, it's al. Noon, an, na an'amta, but an'amta. Ra, ar. Hamza is light, ra is heavy in this case because it's associated with the fatha. Ar. If ra was associated with the dhamma, even if it was before, it would be heavy. But if it's associated with kasra, even if it's before it, it's usually light. There's a lot of exceptions to this, which will be talked about in a different lesson, but it's usually light. Ir. Dal is bouncy, ad. Ta is bouncy, ato. Frown, ato. Ta is not bouncy, but there's air. At. Sad, you frown. Else. But don't purse out your lips. Else, which is a typical mistake when people pronounce Sad with the Sukoon. Else, you just frown. Else, else. And make sure it doesn't sound like Seen with the Sukoon would be S. Smile. Sad with the Sukoon. Else. Seen with the Sukoon. S. Zai with the Sukoon. Az. Zal with the Sukoon. Az. Az. Azkar. Dha with the Sukoon. Same place but frowning. Al. 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 And Tha with the Sukoon. Ath. Ath. Ba is bouncy. Ab. Mim. Waw is the other letter that would fall under madleen, meaning making it soft. Aw, not aw, but aw. Now that we've familiarized ourselves with the concept of sukoon, we can learn this next harakat called Tanween. Tanween, you can kind of make out the word twin in there, and that's how I want you to think of them. Fatha has a twin, Kasra has a twin, and Dhamma has a twin. So I also call them the doubles. Double fatha or double kasra or double dhamma. In Arabic they're called fathatain, kasratain, dhammatain. That's just how you say two fathas, two kasras, and two dhammas. So that's why these symbols look like that. But how do they sound? The twin will bring on the n sound to the word. So fatha's twin will add n sound, and that's a consonant sound of noon. That's a noon sakin sound. So the twin will bring on the sound of noon sakin. So if you have fathatain or double fatha, then that adds on the sound an. Double kasra adds on the sound in, and double dhamma adds on the sound un. An, in, un. So another quick example: ba fathatain, ban, ba kasratain, bin, and ba dhammatain, bun. Ban, bin, bun. Not ban, bin, or boon, but ban, bin, bun. Keeping it short. We should know here that fathatain or fatha's twin will bring along with it an alif, but it'll for the most part be just a silent letter that we don't pronounce until we stop on it, and that's when this alif will be applied, but we'll look at that in a later video. Noon sakin in Tanween is a huge topic in Tajweed that we will look at in the intermediate course, but what I want you to take away from here is that inside every Tanween, inside every twin is a noon sakin. There's a noon with a sukoon, and that's what brings a n sound to the word. So that concludes the first part of our videos on joining letters. Sukoon is at the core of this discussion as it allows us to connect letters together. Next we'll look at the shadda, how it's related to sukoon, how it's applied, how we can derive rules from it, and we'll look at the long vowel, which is made possible because of the sukoon, and finish our discussion of joining letters with the temper sukoon and how that's applied at stops. With that being said, I'll see you in the next video. Salam.